Story 1. I got sick at the pool. The manager forced me to come to work even though I had severe food poisoning, so I threw up directly into the pool, and they had to shut it down for the entire day. A few years ago, I worked as a swim instructor. While I was in college, the job was exhausting being in the water all day, but overall, I liked it because I got to interact with kids and teach them how to swim. It was rewarding to see a child who was once afraid to get their hair wet eventually swim across the pool on their own. But as much as I loved the job itself, I absolutely hated the management. They demanded too much and refused to compensate employees for any extra effort. For example, I gave them my availability schedule in advance so they could plan my shifts accordingly. I was a full-time student and had a second job, but they treated my schedule as a loose suggestion and started assigning me to cover other instructors' shifts whenever they wanted, even during times I had classes. I reminded them that the schedule I gave was the only time I could work. I was already working 30 hours a week. Every time I brought this up, they gave the same BS. If you can't be flexible, we'll have to find someone who can. I put up with it because I needed to pay rent and cover what financial aid didn't. The final straw came when I called in sick. I wasn't even scheduled that day, and I was violently ill, throwing up and having diarrhea every couple of hours. I informed my professors and my other job that I couldn't come in the next day. No one made a fuss. They all wished me well. Then I called my swim school manager. "Hey, I see you scheduled me today. I'm really sorry, but I can't come in. I've been vomiting all day. Pretty sure it's food poisoning. I'm going to the doctor today. I can bring a note if you need one." They always required a note for sick days. "Manager, you can't not come. No one else can cover you." I had already covered others on short notice more than once. I wasn't even supposed to work Thursdays. "Me, I really can't come. I don't want to throw up in the middle of a class." "Manager, just don't eat anything and puke everything out before you come. You have to come. No one else is available. If you don't show up, that's another write-up on top of the one from last week." Note, I was written up for being 2 minutes late because an emergency vehicle blocked the only exit. Half the staff was late that day, and we all got written up. I really should have just stayed home, but I was stupid and didn't find someone to cover me. Somehow, I made it to work on time. It was obvious I was unwell. Other staff immediately asked, "Why the hell are you here?" I just shrugged and said I had bills to pay. Around PM, I was standing in the water waiting for my group when, suddenly my mouth filled with saliva and I felt a wave of nausea. I bolted out of the pool and rushed to the nearest bathroom to vomit. As I was hunched over the toilet, the manager started banging on the door and yelling that I was late for class. I told him I was mid-vomit and wouldn't make it out in time. He said if I didn't show up, he wouldn't give me any more hours, his way of saying I'd be fired. I quickly rinsed my mouth and returned to the pool. I went to my lane, but it was empty. I asked the co-worker if my students had shown up. He said one had called out and the other 2 hadn't arrived. I was furious. My manager had harassed me while I was puking, and the kids weren't even there. Then I felt another wave of nausea. This time, I didn't even try to get out. I just thought, screw this, and I vomited straight into the pool. Yeah, it was disgusting. I was sitting in my own puke, but I felt so awful that I didn't care. I had done what they demanded. I showed up to teach. The pool was immediately shut down. Luckily, the next lane over was just open swim, and those people were far from the puke zone. The manager flipped. He started screaming at me in front of the staff, kids, and parents. "Manager, are you serious? You couldn't go outside?" Me, I couldn't control it. "I told you I was sick. Manager, help clean it up, then come to my office." He walked away. My co-workers saw how sick I was and told me not to worry, they'd handle the cleanup. One gave me water and had me sit down because I was losing balance. That's when I snapped. I went to talk to the manager. He stood there with his arms crossed, glaring. "Manager, I have to write you up for this." Me, "Forget it. I quit." "Manager, you can't do that. You need to give 2 weeks. Who's going to teach your classes?" Me, "Not my problem." I clocked out and walked away. I'll never forget the look on his face. Later, co-workers told me the pool had to be shut down for the whole day and all classes cancelled for cleaning. Admins had to send emails and reschedule everything. I felt terrible, but they said not to worry. Other staff got the day off. It wasn't my fault I was forced to come in. My manager got chewed out by upper management for the closure. He even tried to tell the district manager that I vomited because I was hungover. The next day, the district manager called me to hear my side. I appreciated that. I told the whole story and that I had a doctor's note saying I shouldn't have been working. I also explained how this manager constantly disrespected my time and scheduled me during conflicts. He asked to meet me in person and offered me my job back. I thanked him but declined. Honestly, I'd rather chew my own leg off than work for that jerk. Other employees had similar experiences. One was forced to work with an ear infection. Another had pink eye and the manager still wanted her to teach. He didn't care about staff or the kids. He was fired soon after. Turnover was insane. Long-time employees left or were planning to. Parents complained because instructors kept changing. The service quality was terrible. He ruined everything. By the time they replaced him, I had a better job with higher pay and a more flexible schedule. But I'll never forget the satisfaction of proving I was really sick and exposing how the manager treated staff. Story 2. Revolt against dumb dorm rules. I rebelled against the dumb dorm rules by putting up sarcastic signs on the bathroom door. The dorm manager was furious. This happened almost 20 years ago. It's not a story where someone gets fired or lands in big trouble, but it's a textbook case of malicious compliance. I'll try to be brief, but the details are what make this story funny. At the time, I was in college. My roommate and I were nearing graduation, but still lived in the dorms because it was cheaper and simpler than renting off campus. As a result, we were probably the oldest residents in our building. Why in quotes? Let me explain. Our dorm was the largest in the entire campus. It was a 5-story curved building with a huge parking lot in the middle. This meant each floor was divided into houses with about 30 rooms each. Houses were either all male or all female, but that didn't really matter since there were no physical barriers between them. If you lived at the end of the house, your next door neighbor could be of the opposite sex. Not a co-ed dorm officially, but close. Each house had its own bathroom, a large public restroom with many stalls, urinals, showers, and sinks. When I first moved in, the bathroom doors weren't even locked. People just wandered in and out. But a year before the events of this story, someone completely wrecked one of the bathrooms, like full-on destruction. Everyone swore it wasn't a resident but some drunk outsider. As a result, the following semester all bathrooms were locked and each resident got a key to their house's bathroom. Then the fun began. People constantly forgot their keys and had to walk back to their rooms. Now that the context is clear, here's the core of it. My girlfriend, now wife, often came to visit me in the dorms. We lived on the 4th floor, so whenever she needed a bathroom, she was supposed to go all the way down 3 floors to the lobby or walk across 2 houses about 450 meters to the nearest women's bathroom and hope some girl would let her in. From the start, I offered her my key so she could just use our bathroom. At first, she was too shy and didn't want to break the rules. But eventually, she gave in. After a while, she stopped caring and would just grab the key, go, and come back. One day, she went to the bathroom and right after returned, the floor, our resident assistant knocked on our door. Turns out, he was in the bathroom using the urinal when she walked in, so he followed her to confront the situation. Now, the RA was kind of a soft guy, while my roommate and I were polite but clearly dominant types, older, more experienced, and honestly didn't care much about his authority. I even felt a little bad for him. He mumbled a few lines and finished with, "I'll have to report this to the dorm manager. I'm a fan of giving simple answers to people trying to act like bosses when they're not." This guy wasn't a jerk, just doing his job, so I shrugged and said, "Okay." A day or two later, I was called to the dorm manager's office. She was probably around 30, overall nice. She started with, "This is a serious issue." "Nope." "And it needs to be addressed." Still nope. She told me I had to make a couple of signs to hang on the bathroom door. They needed to, 1 say women weren't allowed, and 2 include an apology. That's when I went from I don't care to now I'm annoyed. It was clear she just wanted to assert power and see me say, "Sorry, I didn't know. Problem is I was born without that gene." I looked her dead in the eyes and flatly said, "Okay." In moments like this, when someone is trying to scold you over nonsense but can't really do anything, I always do that and hold eye contact a few extra seconds. No emotion. I love watching their faces process the moment, like, why isn't he reacting the way I expected? Almost always, they break eye contact first. So I left her office and went back to my room to make the signs. In huge letters, I apologize. Below that, in tiny print, but women are not allowed in this restroom. Then mid-sized font, guests may either go down 3 floors or walk 2 houses to the nearest women's restroom and find a girl with a key. Then, please extend my apologies to your guests. At the bottom, I added a random internet quote about how silly gender-segregated bathrooms were. I don't have the signs anymore, but that was the gist. I posted them on the door and said nothing. It wasn't a big deal around the dorm, but I did enjoy seeing people gather and read them when I was heading to class. One day later, I got a voicemail and my signs were gone. I was summoned back to the manager. She held up a sign and asked, "What the hell is this?" I said, "You told me to make signs apologizing and stating that women aren't allowed." She replied, "You know that's not what I meant. We exchanged words for about 5-10 minutes. She was clearly annoyed, and I made it clear I thought this was a waste of time. To her credit, she didn't yell or insult me, but her tone said, "Why won't this kid just do what I say?" Finally, she said she wouldn't write me up if I made new signs. They had to just say that women weren't allowed, no extras, no formatting. I stared her down again and said, "Okay." Back in my room, I opened Word, created a new document, typed, "Women are not allowed in this bathroom," centered it. On the page, internally debated whether centering counts as formatting. Pressed print. Here's the thing, she didn't say anything about font size. Word's default was Arial 10pt, so the sign had massive margins and tiny text in the middle. I waited for another call or note. Nothing. I guess I followed instructions well enough. The sign stayed up until the end of the year. Over the weeks, I saw girls read the tiny print, smirk, and just walk in with their boyfriend's keys. Edit. I sent this story to my college roommate and asked if he remembered. He said, "Yeah, but wasn't the default font size 12? You can always count on that guy. He remembers everything." Story 3, Psycho Dad at the trampoline park. I trolled a dude in tights and got away with it. Before this incident, I worked at a trampoline park for about a year. My job title was supervisor of the play zone. That included watching over the main jump area, trampolines with basketball hoops, dodgeball zone, the foam pit, and the obstacle course. After a year, I knew that place inside out, staff and regulars alike. We had 6-hour shifts with just one 20-minute break. All of this while being blasted by screaming kids and awful music blaring from the speakers. I especially felt for the new hires. That job was rough. Anyway, about a month after quitting, I came back just to have some fun. My favorite zone had always been the dodgeball court, so that's where I headed. Supervisors rotated every 20 minutes so no one got bored, so someone was bound to switch in soon. At the time, there were about 15 players on the court, mostly kids aged 12 to 14 and a couple of older teens, maybe 17 to 20. A few minutes in, a new supervisor walks up, and I recognize him, new guy named Aaron. First couple of minutes were fine, but then the dude starts looking green. He pulls me aside and says he needs to step out, he's not feeling well. Since I just recently quit and still knew the ropes, he asks if I can cover him while he deals with whatever's going on. He seriously looked like he was about to hurl. I ask if I should call the shift lead, but he says they're already slammed. So we agree, if Shannon, the lead supervisor and a total badass, shows up, I'll explain and smooth things over. Aaron dashes off, pale as a ghost, and I step in to ref the game. No one playing even blinked. They were too busy whipping dodgeballs at each other. Everything was chill. Until that dad showed up with his 8-year-old son. Let me tell you, calling him that dad doesn't even cover it. You'll see what I mean. His kid, let's call him Kevin, was dressed like all the other kids. Shorts, a t-shirt, and those grippy trampoline socks. But Dad was dressed in black compression tights, a skin-tight long-sleeve Under Armour shirt, a matching black headband, and the cherry on top, football gloves with grip, like the ones wide receivers wear. All of this for a dodgeball match on trampolines. With kids half his age, right away, I knew this would end badly. His son was way too little for this area. We had a separate zone for kids under 12. Kevin barely came up to my waist. I pointed this out. Dad waved it off. He'll be fine. It always starts like that. So Dad and Kevin hop into the game. I blow the whistle, game on. Dad's out in under 10 seconds. Tried to catch a slow lob and flubbed at gloves, didn't help him at all. He steps off to the sidelines where I'm standing and starts screaming coaching instructions at his son like this was the Super Bowl. "Come on, Kevin. Wreck those. Little punks. Don't crouch. Move. Dodge. Roll. Again. He literally quoted a movie at one point. It would have been hilarious if he hadn't been yelling it directly into my ear. He starts pacing along the court, clapping his gloved hands, while poor Kevin is just trying to dodge these beastly throws. The only thing saving the kid from getting clobbered was his tiny size. Some of the older kids were throwing hard like varsity baseball levels of speed. Again, I suggest moving to the under 12 area. Dad isn't having it. He's fine. These little shts aren't a match for him. I politely ask him not to curse. Wanna guess how well that went? Dad starts boiling over. At one point, he's even shouting fake out. Calls whenever he thought someone hit another player. Cam and ref, you didn't see that? Kevin nailed that punk. Meanwhile, Kevin could barely throw the ball halfway across the court. I stay quiet, just remind Dad again to keep it clean. This is a family place, not the damn dodgeball Olympics. The dad was deaf to my words. Maybe his headband was too tight. Some of the kids who got hit with the ball started leaving the court. They weren't going to put up with a shrieking, bouncing grown-up child in tight leggings anymore. Come on, Kevin. Dodge, dodge, dodge. The dad clapped his hands with every dodge and shouted in my ear. He was loud. He screamed whenever someone on the opposing team got hit by a ball. As a coach, the dad was pretty terrible. Honestly, I felt sorry for the kid for having a dad like that. But watching one of the older teens throw a foam racket ball straight into Kevin's nose, and seeing the dad's face go from red to deep purple was pretty satisfying. The kid was knocked off his feet like a rag doll. The balls themselves were made of soft rubber. They won't break anything, but the hit still hurts. Kevin curled up on the ground, covering his face with his hands. And then the dad stormed onto the court, rushed over to the unfortunate teen who had hit his son, and got right up in his face. What the F? Why the hell did you do that? What kind of FING moron hits kids? The dad started cussing and shoving the teen, who looked guilty. I stepped between them and calmly explained the rules, pointing at his son. You said yourself he could handle it. These things happen. Alright, let's calm down, get some ice for the nose, and enjoy the rest of the day. Screw you, get the manager, you're done. The dad shouted, yanking his son by the arm and dragging him off the court. Kevin, by the way, looked totally fine, still a bit in shock, red-faced, but nothing serious. The others watched the scene between me and the dad. I shrugged. Shannon's in the office behind the front desk, but you should really get some ice. I said, screw you. He interrupted and pulled Kevin away. Now I started worrying about Aaron, the guy I was subbing for. What if he got blamed for this? I decided to just continue the game as if nothing had happened. About 5 minutes later, the dad came back, grinning, with Kevin holding an ice pack to his face. Thank God Shannon, the shift lead, and Aaron were there. Hey op, Shannon said. Mr. Dad here claims you let his son get injured on the court. I actually laughed and shook my head. No, he said himself his son was more than capable of playing with the 12-plus group. Of course, I recommended the under 12 court, but he refused. He was also harassing other players, calling them jerks and insulting them. The dad's smug look started to fade, especially when a few players backed up my story. He started protesting again, saying we were all lying because we were young and out to get him. Shannon and Aaron's faces clearly showed they believed me. The dad, meanwhile, was muttering a fresh batch of pathetic excuses. Then his son tugged his hand and asked if they could just go do something else. Once again, I felt sorry for the kid. He was clearly more mature than his father. That's all for now. Thank you for listening to this story till the end. Don't forget to follow our channel and take care.